Okay, trig graph word problems. The graph of a function with the sine curve, it's been transformed and there's a new graph. So its new range is that. So I know that the midline is right at 0, the top, the bottom. Okay, so I know that my A will be 4 because the vertical stretch is 4, the new amplitude is 4. And the zeros are every pi over 2. So I need to make an equation that corresponds to this. Okay, so let's just talk about just this piece. So a normal sine curve, okay, would be, okay, that satisfies the negative 4 to 4 part. So y equals 4 sine, I know that's going to be the front. Now, normally this is a 2 pi, and this is a 1 pi, and this is a 0. Those would be the x-intercepts, the zeros. That's on a normal, but I need every pi over 2. So I need to change this to a pi over 2, and then next, if I go up another pi over 2, I need to change this to a pi. So what am I doing with those? Okay, I'm doing a horizontal compression by 2. Okay, so instead of having an x-intercept at pi, if I divide that by 2, it'll be pi over 2. So I need a 2x. Okay, so what I really did was thinking about compressing it in to make the x-intercepts every 90 instead of every 180. Determine the maximum value and a value of t for which the max occurs. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening here. So the mid is at 10,000, and I'm going to be going 3,000 above that. So the highest will be 13,000, and the lowest will be 7,000. Ooh, my graph isn't very symmetric or anything. Okay, so this is the low, this is the high, that's the middle. Okay, so this is a sine curve. So I'm going to draw a sine curve. And I'm going to give this an x value. So 2 pi divided by pi over 10. Now I'm going to flip and multiply. So this will have an x value of 20. So this 20 divided by 4 is 5, 10, 15, 20. Those are the x values. Okay, so I need to move right 2010. Okay, so this coordinate is now going to have an x value of 2010, which means this coordinate will now have an x value of 2015 because I have 5 above it. So here's the answers to my question. Determine the max. So the max is 13,000. That's the highest height. And determine a value of t at 2015. So there are different answers to that as well, but that would be probably the most common one. This is the graph of 2 cos theta plus 1. We're going to solve it for where cos theta is negative a half, and we're going to indicate that on the curve. So do you notice that that's graphed there, and if we do 0 equals for y, then I solve, and now where this graph equals 0 will also be the same as where cos is -1/2. So where does this graph equal 0? Right here, 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 and here. Okay, which of the following is true about the periods of the three functions? Okay, so I know that there's a b of 3, a b of 3, and there's no b. So the graphs, the f function, the g function have the same period. Yep, that's true. F and K have the same period? Nope, they don't have the same b value. All the graphs have the same? Nope. None of them have the same? Nope. So it is A. Given this graph below, determine another equation that could produce that. Okay, so there's multiple ones, but for sure the mid will have to be a +1, no matter what. And for sure you're going to need some kind of 2, whether it be a 2 or a -2. There has to be some kind of 2 in the front. So we could have different things going on. If we want to try a different cos curve, why don't we go if I take that coordinate, that x value is 2, so I could say that happened, where I shifted it right to. I could do a negative cos curve, so -2 cos. And then if I did a -2 cos, it would look like that, which means this coordinate would have to move over here, which is 1 to the right. So there's another one that would make the same. Okay, if you were doing some kind of sine curve, I'm guessing you would have to do some kind of shifting with halves. Okay, this is somebody who graphed the tan curve. Why is it incorrect? So they have the wrong zeros. This should be at 0, and this should be at 90 degrees, or pi/2 should be an asymptote. So what's wrong about it? I think that they have it shifted wrong. Okay, so we could say numerous things. The zeros should be at 0, and then the next one should be at pi, 2 pi, right? Or the asymptotes should be at pi/2 and then 3 pi/2. So they're in the wrong spot as well. Okay. So this person has that graph shifted in the wrong direction. Actually, yeah. The following graph represents tidal waves, and so what's the average height of the water? So I'm trying to think what's halfway. So 2, 10, there would be a 6 in the middle. So I could go average them. the average height is 6. Okay, I guess I should put some meters on it because it's in meters. What's the period of the graph? Okay, so from here to here, that would complete a cycle. Since this has an x value of 25, this would be 12.5, so 12.5 hours. Using the graph, find the coordinate right here. Okay, so the middle height is what I'm after. So what's halfway in there? So I could add the two values and average them. So 20 divided by 2, so this is 10. So the coordinate is what I'm after, so I better write the whole coordinate, which is 6, 10. Oh, sorry, it just says to find the value of the y. So no, I could just go with 10. Should read the book. Okay, number 9. This is the equation. What's the value of b? So let's talk about a cycle. So from here, I go up, mid, down, mid. So that span would be an entire cycle. So if this is negative pi, so you're jumping by a pi, so 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. So from here to here, the total span is 5 pi. You see that? It's not 4 pi, that's the x value there, but that's not the distance. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 pi, what would I have to divide it by to equal 5 pi? Okay, so to solve this, I'm actually going to cross multiply, which flips those around. So I flopped them, and then those would cancel, so A. This is the sketch below. Explain how this sketch would be used to solve this. So where does this equation equal 1/2? Well, I just would graph a height of 1/2, and these would be my answers. Okay, so explain. So you would just graph a y equals 1/2, and where they intersect, the x value is the solution. So I've been given these two equations. What's true? They both have the same period. This is not true because this has a 2 and this has a 1 as a b. The b's aren't equal. They have the same amplitude. No, that is not true because this one has an a of 3 and this one has the a of just 1. They have the same minimum value and they have the same max value. So this one, -1 is the middle. So if I go 3 above that, it gets me to 2. If I go 3 below, it gets me to -4. And on this one, +1 is the middle. If I go up 1, I'm at a high of 2. If I go down 1, I'm at a 0. So those would be the tops and the bottoms. So they do have the same top. So now I can say D. Number 12, the height of a bicycle pedal is represented by this equation. So it's the height of the pedal off the ground versus the time. Sketch at least one graph, one cycle of this graph. Okay, so cos with the 15. So cos curve would look like this. And 15 with a -15. So that's that part. And I'm going to do this x value right here. normally 2 pi divided by 2 pi over 5. That's the b. I'm going to times and flip, and that creates 2 pi to be canceled. So therefore the x value here is 5. So if I divide that, this would be 5 divided by 4 is 1.25, 2.5, 3.75. Those would be the x values. Okay, and now we have to also shift this up 30. So 30 is in the middle, which means 45 would be on the top and 15 would be on the bottom. So top, middle, bottom, middle, top. So 1.25, there's my x values, 2.5. So I want to know at 7.5 seconds. So if I keep going here, the next would be 6.25, and then the next one would be 7.5. So therefore, if I continue the pattern, this would be a middle, and then 7.5 would be a low, and the low height is 15. And what am I in centimeters? Okay, so this is the Ferris wheel. It's 1 meter off the ground, and the diameter is 16. The ride lasts for 4 minutes. So 1 is going to be the lowest, and if the diameter is 16, it means that I'll be 17 off the ground when I'm actually at the top, which means my middle height would be 9. And so you get on the Ferris wheel here, you're going to be, so this is position 1. At position 2, you're going to be at 9 off the ground. At position 3, you're going to be on the top. And then at position 4, you're going to be back on the side height. And then back to the start. So the ride lasts for 4 minutes, so that's a 4, which makes this a 1, 2, 3. Okay. We got to determine the equation here. So we need a plus 9 at the end. Okay. We need an amplitude of 8. So we need 8. And we have to write it with a cos curve. Okay. Now we know that 2 pi divided by some b number would have to give us 4. So I'm going to switch those places. And then I could just reduce this by 2. So there's going to be a pi over 2 there. Okay, and now cos curve starts on the top. So it has shifted right 2. So t minus 2. Okay, and I'm using the same variables that they did a t and a h of t. You could have also forgotten about the shift and put a negative 8, because that would have just flipped cos to start on the bottom instead of the top. Okay. Number 14, given these characteristics, determine the equation. So y equals, we have an amplitude of 2, so we need a 2 in the front. Vertical translation down 3, so we need a negative or minus 3 at the back. and the period is pi over 4. So 2 pi over some kind of number will have to give me pi over 4. I'm going to switch those places. And I'm going to flip multiply with this fraction. And then that would cancel and I would get 8. So I need a b value of 8. Some of you could have done that in your head, like thinking 2 over what is 1/4? 2 over 8. Determine the range of this function. So the mid is at -3. You're going to be going up 2, so that would get you to a -1. And you're going to have to go down 2, which would get you to a -5. So the range would be like that. Given these graphs, identify the choice of the solutions. Where does f of x equal g of x? So where do they intersect? Looks like there's 3 spots there. So this would be negative pi over 2, 0, and pi over 2, just where they intersect. Okay, here's a graph. Determine the equation of this sinusoidal function. So I need a mid of 4. I need an amplitude of 2. And 8 is the end of the cycle. So 2 pi over some kind of value will give me a cycle of 8. So if I switch those, 2 pi over 8 equals b. Switch those places. I'm going to reduce. So pi over 4 equals b. Okay, and then if I talk about this being sine, this would be the starter. So I don't need to move it right or left. Okay, so the volume will be a function of t, using the same variables here, equals 2 for the amplitude, sine of pi over 4 t, that's the variables, and then I needed a midline of 4, so plus 4. Determine the values of this equation. So this will be a plus 1. And then how far am I off? I'm 2. So this will be a 2. And this is the end of the cycle, 10 pi. So 2 pi divided by something will be equal 10 pi. I'm going to switch those places. That cancels, and that would reduce to 1/5. So I guess we could write a equals 2, b equals 1/5, and d equals 1. Steve's asked to determine an equation with a larger period than the period of this graph, and he answered this, but he's incorrect. Okay, so this is 2 pi over 2, so it has a period of pi. And then this 2 pi over 6 has a period of that, which is smaller. Okay, so remember that this is a divide by b, so it's making it smaller. Number 19. Identify the equation for all the asymptotes. So remember that tan, when you divide by 0, so y divided by x. So right here, on the unit circle, that is causing an asymptote. So this is a pi over 2, and this is a 3 pi over 2. So this would mean every pi, that's not happening. This would mean every 2 pi. This would mean at pi over 2, that's good. And if we were to rotate 1 pi from that, so this one would be true. This would say at pi over 2, and then the next time you rotate a circle. So that one's not right. So this is pi over 2, and if you rotate it pi, you would get to 1. If you rotate it pi, you would get to 1. Here's a graph. Determine the exact value of this x coordinate. Okay, so this has a pi. Oh, here we go. So our equation is this, and our 2 is the b value. So 2 pi over 2 equals a period of pi. Okay, so does this make sense? From here to here is not a period, right? The period would end actually right there. From 0 to pi would be the period. So this would complete half of that cycle. So we're halfway there. So x will equal pi over 2. Explain why tan does not have an amplitude. An amplitude is when you're consistently spanning up and down from the middle. And remember the pattern with tan. So tan, so this is tan, it doesn't fluctuate up and down off the midline. So there, it doesn't have an amplitude. Okay, you might be able to answer that in a different way too. Determine an equation with these, so an amplitude of 3, so we need 3 in the front, and it doesn't matter what we're picking here. Okay, so a period of 6 means 2 pi divided by some kind of b would have to give me 6, so I'm going to switch those, which reduces to pi over 3. Okay, I need a minimum of -5. Okay, so the min is -5. And then remember our amplitude was 3. So if I'm 3 above that, I'm at -2. If I'm 3 above that, I'm at 1. So this is the max, the mid, and the low. Okay, because I have to do 3 in between each. So the mid, I'm going to have to write a -2 for that. Okay, and you don't have to pick sine. You can pick a cos there because it doesn't specify. So 23, determine using this how you could use it to solve this. So this is basically where does this equal 0? So those would be your answers where they intersect a height of 0. So a function has a maximum at 5, 300. and then a min. So give a sine and a cos equation. So first let's find what middle height we would be at. So 100 and 300 means the middle is 2. And how much are we spanning above 200 and below? So this is 100. Okay, the period. So this distance is 10 apart, but this is not a cycle. So my whole cycle is 20. This is a half of a cycle. And so I'm going to go 2 pi divided by some b equals my period. I'm going to switch those and get a b value. Okay, so I have a b, I have a d, I have an a. So now we're going to fill those in for both sine and cos, but we're going to talk about our shifts after this. So they both would have 100 in the front. They both would have a 10 pi for b, or sorry, not 10 pi, pi over 10. And they both will have a plus 200 at the end. Okay, so now when I talk about a cos curve, this would be the start of it, the top. So that's 5 right. So I'm going to put that in the cos. And if I was to talk about a sine curve, it starts on the midline heading up. So this would be a sine. So I actually need to understand what the x value is there. So if this is 15, this would be 10. So every 5. And then this would be 0. Okay, so now I don't need anything extra in here. Okay, minimum point for -3. And then I have a max. So give both equations again. So let's start what's in the middle. So from that to that, so if I add that, that's 12 divided by 2 is 6. So these are both going to have a plus 6 at the end. And how much am I going off of 6? So that's 9 up and that's 9 down. So they're both going to have a 9 as an a value. And from here to here, from 4 to 16 is 12. So the cycle is 24. That's not the full cycle, that's a half of it. So 2 pi over some b value gives me 24. So 2 pi over 24 equals b. So I'm reducing that to pi over 12. So they both will have that. So now it's all about a starter point. So this is a cos start on the top. So we can go right 16. And this coordinate would be a sine because it's in the middle heading up. So what's the x value there? So this is 4 and that's 16. So this should be 10. 4, 10, 16. That makes sense? That's halfway in between there. So x minus 10 to show a shift right 10.